I never imagined that the day I trusted my mother with $20 million would become the day she disappeared, and that I would find myself laughing at what was inside the safe she left behind. Everything started a few weeks before my 30th birthday. I'd recently inherited a massive sum, $20 million to be exact, from a distant relative I barely knew existed. The money came with no strings attached, no warnings, no instructions. Just a legal transfer into my account. I remember staring at the screen in disbelief, the numbers glowing back at me, changing my life in an instant. Naturally, the first problem was, what do you do with $20 million when you're just an ordinary guy who never expected to have that kind of money? The answer, it turns out, was more complicated than I thought. I decided I needed to keep it somewhere safe, somewhere no one would ever think to look. After a few sleepless nights and paranoid calls to financial advisors, I made a choice. I would keep the cash physically close, locked away in my mother's old safe. Mom's house was a relic of the past, one of those creaky Victorian homes with peeling paint and a large oak door that groaned every time you opened it. She'd owned it since before I was born, and it had a certain charm despite its age. The safe was hidden behind a loose panel in her office. Heavy, old, and impenetrable by any casual burglar. I gathered the cash in neat bundles and placed it inside the safe late one evening. I remember the cold metal of the lock as I turned the key and heard the satisfying click that meant it was sealed tight. Alongside the money, I placed some other valuables, a few old family documents, some rare coins I had collected over the years, and a small, unmarked envelope. The envelope was the strange part. I wasn't sure why I'd put it in there, but somehow I felt it belonged with the money. That night, I went to bed feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Part of me was excited about the fortune now at my fingertips. The other part was uneasy, as if I had just opened a door that was better left closed. The next morning changed everything. I woke up to the piercing silence of an empty house. Mom was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought she might have stepped out for an early walk or to run an errand. But as hours passed with no sign of her, the unease turned into panic. I checked every room, her favorite chair by the window, the kitchen where she brewed her morning coffee, the garden she tended with such care. The house was untouched, no signs of struggle or forced entry. Then I went to her office, and my heart sank. The safe was open. The $20 million was gone. I sank to my knees, staring at the empty vault. How could this have happened? How did she get in without me knowing? And most importantly, where was she? I had so many questions but no answers. Then I noticed it. The small, unmarked envelope I had placed inside the safe was still there, tucked neatly in the corner, as if untouched. Curiosity overtook despair. I opened it carefully, half expecting it to be empty. Instead, inside was a single piece of paper. It wasn't a letter or a note, but a photograph. A photograph of my mother, smiling broadly, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. She looked happy, almost radiant, but there was something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. Underneath the photo, written in her elegant handwriting, were the words, "If you want the truth, follow the path she left behind." I laughed. It was a bitter, hollow laugh, but it escaped me anyway. Because after all this time, after everything, my mom had pulled one last trick. And this was just the beginning. Days turned into a frantic search. I called the police, hired private investigators, and scoured every place she had ever been. The man in the photograph was no help. No one seemed to know him, and the image itself was old and grainy. But something about that phrase, "Follow the path she left behind," kept echoing in my mind. I started digging into her past like never before. What secrets had she been hiding? Why take the money and vanish? And what, exactly, was I supposed to find? As I searched, I discovered that my mother had led a life far more complicated than I ever imagined. She wasn't just a quiet woman living alone in that creaky old house. She had connections, old acquaintances, maybe even enemies. One night, after going through boxes of her old belongings, I found a hidden journal. It was filled with coded entries, cryptic messages, and strange symbols. At first, it made no sense. But as I worked to decode it, a story began to emerge. It told of danger, betrayal, and a hidden fortune much larger than the $20 million I had. It spoke of a secret alliance and a shadowy figure known only as the broker, who had promised protection in exchange for loyalty. And then there were references to a final transaction, something that was supposed to happen soon, something that might explain why my mother disappeared. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that the $20 million was only the surface. What my mom had done, taking the money and vanishing, was part of a much bigger game. And I was about to be pulled into it. At the end of that first week, I stood in the empty house, the evening light casting long shadows across the floorboards. The photograph, the journal, the missing money, all of it was a puzzle. And somewhere out there, my mother was watching, waiting. And me? I was ready to follow the path she left behind. The old house was filled with silence that night, a silence that felt heavier than ever. I sat at the kitchen table, the yellowed pages of Mom's journal spread before me, dim light flickering from a single lamp. The more I read, the more tangled the story became. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and a past she had kept locked away for decades. The cryptic entries spoke of a man called the broker, someone my mom seemed to both fear and trust. He appeared in the journal like a shadowy puppeteer, pulling strings behind the scenes. The last few pages were frantic, written in a hurried scrawl. If they find the safe, the money won't mean a thing without the code. The broker knows. I must disappear before it's too late. I had no idea what code she meant, but it was clear that whoever they were dangerous. Whoever had taken the money wasn't just stealing cash. They wanted something far bigger. The next morning, I started tracing her steps. I visited her closest friends, old neighbors, anyone who might shed light on the man in the photo or the broker. Most were confused, even shocked. Mom was known as kind but quiet. No one had ever suspected she carried such secrets. One afternoon, while searching through her desk drawers, I found an old address book. Among the faded names was one I didn't recognize, written carefully in Mom's handwriting. Elliot Shaw, 47, Willow Lane. With little else to go on, I drove to Willow Lane, a sleepy street lined with oak trees and small houses. Number 47 was a modest brick home, the kind that looked lived in, but not much else. I knocked, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal a man in his late 40s, sharp eyes, and a weary expression. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. "I'm looking for Elliot Shaw," I said. "I think you might be him." He nodded slowly, stepping aside to let me in. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves and scattered papers. There was an air of quiet desperation in the room. Over cups of bitter coffee, I told him what I knew about the money, the safe, Mom's disappearance, and the mysterious journal. Elliot's face hardened. "I haven't seen her in years," he said. "But I know about the broker. He's no ordinary man. If your mother got involved with him, she's in deep trouble." "Who is he?" I asked. "Someone who controls a lot behind the scenes," Elliot replied. "Money, power. He's the one who orchestrates deals that most people never hear about. He's ruthless. Dangerous." Days passed in a blur of phone calls, dead ends, and growing fear. I felt like I was being watched, shadowed by unseen eyes. One night, I returned to Mom's house, and decided to open the safe again. This time, I noticed something I had missed before, faint scratches around the lock, like someone had tried to pick it. Then I remembered the code. The journal had mentioned a code that was needed to access the money properly. I rifled through the journal again and found a series of numbers hidden within a poem Mom had written years ago. I tried the combination, and with a quiet click, the safe door swung open. Inside was the $20 million, but also another envelope. This one was different. It was heavy, sealed with wax, and bore my mother's initials. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Her handwriting was shaky, filled with emotion. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. The money you see is just a fraction of what's truly at stake. The broker wants what I have, and so do others. Trust no one. The path ahead is dangerous, but you are stronger than you know." At the bottom was a key, a small, old-fashioned key that looked like it belonged to a diary or a box. That night, I lay awake, clutching the key. What did it open? What else was hidden in my mother's tangled past? The next morning, a knock at the door startled me. It was a man I didn't recognize, dressed sharply, eyes cold. "Mr. Carter?" he said. "I believe you have something that belongs to my client." I stared at him, heart pounding. This was just the beginning. The man at the door, sharply dressed and cold-eyed, didn't wait for an invitation. "My client is very interested in what your mother left behind," he said, his voice low and firm. I clutched the old key in my hand, feeling the weight of everything I had discovered so far. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and a legacy I had no idea I'd inherited. "I don't know what you want," I said cautiously. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The key you hold opens more than a box, Mr. Carter. It opens the door to the truth." I decided then I couldn't wait for threats or deals. I had to follow the path my mother left, no matter how dangerous. Using the key, I searched through Mom's belongings for anything it might open. Finally, behind a loose floorboard in her bedroom, I found a small wooden box, worn with age but locked tight. With trembling hands, I inserted the key and turned. Inside was a collection of old documents, photographs, and a USB drive. I plugged the drive into my laptop and stared at the screen in shock. The files contained evidence of a covert operation, illegal deals, money laundering, names of powerful figures involved in a criminal network. My mother hadn't just been protecting money. She had been protecting secrets. Secrets that could destroy the broker and his empire. Suddenly, it all made sense. She hadn't stolen the money to run away with it. She had taken it as leverage. She was hiding, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. And the man who had come to my door? He was the broker's envoy, trying to reclaim what was lost. I sat back, overwhelmed. I understood now why she vanished. She had made the ultimate sacrifice to protect me, and to bring justice. And in that moment, I laughed. Not because of the money, but because inside that safe wasn't just cash. It was the courage of a mother who would disappear for her child, leaving behind a trail to follow, and a story to tell.